The British discovered oil in the North Sea in the 1960s, and it had a transformational effect on the British economy. What can we learn from them, and what are British companies doing here? Mr. High Commissioner, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Tell me, I mean, you come from a country that discovered the oil, perhaps not too far away from Nigeria. Nigeria was discovered in the 70s, you in the 60s. How is it that, you know, in the case of Britain, we don't describe oil as either a blessing or a curse? I mean, did you ever think about it as a potential curse?
It was a surprise to the UK that we discovered oil. It was not something we expected. We had a coal industry, we had manufacturing, but as an oil producer, that came as news. We had oil companies, but you know, they were experienced producing oil in the desert sands of Arabia, not in the cold, wet North Sea. So the whole industry, in some ways, had to grow from scratch. And it was a new opportunity, and something that we had to seize, and we had to adapt ourselves to. And in the course of adapting to that, building that industry, we learned a great deal. We made some mistakes, and I hope that Ghana can learn from some of the mistakes we made. But ultimately, it has been a tremendous benefit to the British economy, how we were able to develop it. And I hope these are some of the experiences that we can share and some of the expertise that we can help bring to Ghana.
It's not a big part of economic activity now, is it? I mean, is it in decline, the British oil industry?
It's sort of at peak oil, at the moment. It's not going to carry on up. But it hasn't yet really started trending down.
But is it a big chunk? I mean, GDP? I mean, you know, I ask you this question so we can get a sense of how much you depend on it. Of course, it's a much more diversified economy, I would imagine. Wasn't always like that, was it? I mean, when it first came up, how significant was it as a contributor?
At the outset, it wasn't. It consumed investment. But now it's around between 5 and 10% of the GDP. It comes ultimately one way or another from the economy. We have maybe 500,000 people employed in one way or another by the oil and gas sector.
500,000?
500,000, though interestingly only 30,000 of those, so well less than 10%, actually work for oil companies. The bulk of the employment comes in supply chain, related service industries and the rest, but it has generated a great deal of wealth within the economy as a whole, as well as producing cash revenue for the government and income for the people most closely involved and employed by the oil companies.
So it was never, you know, you were never really nervous about it as being a source of if you like, social turmoil, were you? I mean, that's not something the UK was concerned about.
No, I think the only sort of level of political concern, if you like, was on the part of the Scottish people, fearing that these resources found off their own coasts would be sucked south to the benefit of London and the southern part of the islands. And therefore making sure that the Scottish people and the Scottish local governments were fully involved in the development process was an important part of it. So there was some nervousness there. And there was quite a debate about how the money should be used as well.
That's another point.
And whether it should be set aside for future generations, as some have done, the Norwegians, for example, whether it should be put into sovereign wealth funds in the way that many of the Middle Eastern countries have done, or whether it should be used immediately for the benefit of the people.
And what did you opt to do?
We decided that the oil revenue was best placed, along with all the other revenue that comes from the people, from the industries of the country, into the general revenue, into the Treasury, and could there be used for whatever priorities the British government, the British Parliament agreed. So to some extent it was absorbed into the overall income that government had, but it did enable us to do a number of things which would otherwise have been harder to do. On the one hand, we were able to invest considerably in the national infrastructure. Secondly, it to some extent funded the Thatcherite revolution in the British economy, which was a great deal of fairly drastic and quite painful cutting back of nationalised industries through privatisation, through rationalisation. And it helped fund that process, if you like, and has enabled the British economy to go from strength to strength.
So there must have been a phase, I would imagine, in the history of the development of the industry in the UK where the state was a key player. I mean, BP was a national company, wasn't it?
For a while. Yes, but interestingly, the development of the North Sea was private sector led. And we realized two things. We had some expertise in BP, which at the time, for a while, was nationalized industry, but that was then put back into the private sector.
Under Thatcher? Or before?
In that period.
Yes.
In that period. And that meant we had some expertise in oil, but not everything we needed. We still had to bring in expertise from outside investors, from US oil companies.
From the United States?
From the United States.
So it's not entirely surprising for us to see loads of them here?
Not at all. And for a while around Aberdeen, you would see Americans in Texan hats and cowboy boots, walking around. Yeah. But we needed them. We needed their expertise. We needed to learn from them. But we had to have them there. Otherwise, it would have been an extra long. It would have taken twice as long if we waited till all our own citizens were trained up to take all the jobs and the rest. It would have delayed development of oil by 10 years or so.
Yeah.
So we're very happy to have outside investors come in, outside companies bring in that expertise to help develop the field while sitting alongside them and learning.
So that's the key thing, that what you did was you sort of sat aside them and learned, and I would imagine that in the long term you were looking to take up many of the positions that they occupied initially because of the lack of expertise.
Yes, the government of the time took a very explicit view that the development of the oil fields must be private sector led, but that British companies must have an absolutely equal opportunity to get involved. Now, we had very few British manufacturing companies who produced machines, goods, engines, hoses, platforms or anything for the oil industry. But we had an engineering sector, very good at building steam engines, electric engines, motor cars, all kinds of machinery and manufactures. And what the government did was say the oil business must open its tenders to all British companies. And they found a mechanism of ensuring that all British companies were made aware of what offers were out there for business. And a lot of them looked at it and said, well, we haven't made this in the past, but we could make it. And so they put in bids, and that helped generate what is now a very extensive British industry supplying the oil sector.
So it was actively cultivated, more or less. I mean, we found oil, there's a lot of talk here about local content. There's always the concern that perhaps it'll be on the fringes, it'll never be part of the economy, people will not benefit and so on. Some suggest that therefore there should be much more, if you like pro-local Ghanaian regulation. What do you think of all this? I mean, and my question is did you have to go through that as well?
Yeah, the British approach was that British companies, British people should be encouraged but not subsidised. Right. They had to compete of their own ability, their own capability to compete within it. That means we now have a globally competitive oil industry, and a lot of whom are coming here looking for opportunities, looking to bring their expertise here, and providing as good value as you would find anywhere else in the world. But because we made them compete, they became competitive. Yes. So they had the opportunity, they were encouraged. We certainly helped train people. We encouraged people to set up training institutes. The universities in Scotland have very good faculties now for oil skills.
But I want to return, just before we move on to something else, onto this issue of the role of a national oil company. Okay, I mean, and I'm returning to British Petroleum. Is it correct, Mr. Ambassador? What I'm saying is that there was a point where you also understood that had to be present for Britain to benefit?
There is a role for a national oil company to be involved, and you see that in almost
So it's not an ownership thing necessarily?
No, for a government-owned entity
yes.
To be involved, but in the long run, for that to be competitive and effective, BP had to be privatised.
Right.
As long as the government kept its hands firmly on it,
yeah.
it was not going to be as efficient or effective as it was.
So over time, so you mean then it was privatised?
Yeah. And what you need to retain in government's hands is an adequate regulatory structure and an adequate taxation structure so that the government itself can enforce the necessary laws for environmental protection, for protecting its own revenue, and also encouraging continued investment, making sure that it is sufficiently attractive to the private sector that those companies will want to come.
You see, that's the delicate balancing act, isn't it? You must talk some more about that.
Yeah.
I mean, government wanting the industry to benefit its people and communities, and at the same time ensure that foreign companies who are going to put their money into this business feel there is sufficiently attractive. That's tricky.
We had people in the UK, as you know, we've always had a very strong socialist tradition,
Yes.
who said, this is the people's oil, we must develop it for the people by the government.
Yes.
And private
For the people by
industry
the
should
government.
not be involved. And we could have taken that approach. We didn't. Those that have taken that approach have tended to find that it may look good in the short term, but in the long run, it doesn't work.
But there is a time, maybe, isn't it? Could it be that it really is not? I mean, sometimes I think we get too stuck in the philosophical issues. Perhaps it's just strategically wise for government to be involved for some time to ensure that there is a basis locally, and then proceed to reduce its role to one of the regulator and so on. Is that also possible?
It is, if you've got the expertise already. If you haven't got the expertise already, to do that, to impose strict government control from the outset, would simply delay the development of the skills. And you could insist that everybody employed here was Ghanaian.
Yes.
But then you'd have to wait 5-10 years before you had enough Ghanaians who were trained to the right level of skills to develop the industry. Or you can go ahead bringing in expertise from the outside while Ghanaians are learning. I spent some time on one of the rigs out in the Jubilee field, and most of the people on the rig were expatriate, but there were 2 Ghanaians sitting there watching everything, one from GNPC, one from Tullow, and they were learning.
So they're understudying these guys.
Understudying these guys. I know Tullow have already taken at least 15 sort of young executives to their headquarters in the UK to start learning and training. Those people will grow up into the industry in the same way that British people suddenly found there's an interest here, and they would start at one level, and now a large part, but not all, of the British oil industry is indigenous.
But we have to get it right. You take gold, for example. I mean, that has been mined in Ghana for many years. You would have imagined or thought that this would be the place where people come to go to school with regard to gold. That is not the case. So it isn't always that simple.
I wouldn't say it's not entirely the case, because I've been to Tarkwa, the University of Mines there, College of Mines, which provides an excellent training. And in Obuasi, most of the companies are now staffed with Ghanaian staff. But still, you will want people to go to the University of Mines in South Africa, because they have longer experience, they have greater expertise. And likewise, it makes a lot of sense for people to go overseas now to the US, to the UK, to Holland, wherever, to learn oil mining skills. And then in due course, the University of in Tarkwa, I know, is developing an oil faculty, and similarly others will. You always need a diversity. You can't do everything yourself.
No.
But you can raise your domestic level of skills so that then people will be teaching each other here.
This is a modular gas turbines that we are installing for VRA. Apart from the bigger industries in Tema, we can supply all the needs of Tema. Its location is based on the anticipation of getting the West African gas pipeline gas. It's about 97% ready. We can even replicate this in, say, Kumasi, Tamale, or Wa. All our transactions have been passed through Fidelity Bank. They have actually been our partners in this project from the very beginning. They put up the financial package for us. Insurance, bonds, we appreciate their services. They are very flexible with us, and we think they have been a good partner.
Must we be worried about British companies and British expatriates arriving in their numbers to work in Ghana's oil and gas industry? Must we? Are they taking up our Ghanaian jobs, or is this just a fact of life that this is just the way it happens?
Absolutely not. There's nothing to worry about.
Yeah.
They are bringing expertise to make available to Ghana to develop this resource that you have.
Yeah.
And that will enable, we hope, first oil to be achieved in record-breaking time, really, very fast-track development to try and produce first oil by the end of next year. And you therefore need to bring in the skills. you will find a lot of Scottish accents around.
Yes.
And, people come in from the North Sea, and that's an example. You know, in 10 years' time, you'll find a lot of Ghanaians, maybe working in the North Sea, maybe in the Gulf of Texas. So these people coming in are a resource that are being used to the benefit of the early development of Ghana's own resources. And likewise, outside companies are able to raise the money to deploy the expertise. Tullow brought in the rig, the Eric Rauda rig, which is a state-of-the-art, fantastic facility, and is doing a tremendous job. And the technical challenges are huge. From that rig, the drill goes down through 2 miles of water and then through another mile of rock before you reach the oil. Wow. And to do that with pinpoint accuracy is a phenomenal achievement, and is where the oil industry has got to. And you need people with the right skills to manage that. It's not an easy task. Yeah. The rig is not moored. It just sits there, and the ocean has to be kept in exactly the right place. Which is why that rig, I'm told, costs around $1 million a day
just
to run. And when you think that rig is going to be there for about 18 months before any oil is produced, you can do the sums. That's a big investment. You're looking at something like half a billion dollars before any revenue comes in. Now, the Ghanaian state could try and find that money, but the private sector here will do it for you. And then the revenue that's produced will be shared, as in the UK. And the state in the UK made sure that we got a fair slice of the revenues that come in. I'm told over the years since 1968, the UK industry has generated something like $230 billion, and about 50% of the revenue came to the government overall. I've got many different ways, and obviously it varies over time because the companies, they've invested huge sums, as I was suggesting, need to make the money back. Yeah. So you need something that is fair for both, and that's perfectly possible to find. And there are examples from around the world, and that I know GNPC have been looking at and learning from. Yeah. I mean, if you make the regime too tough for the business, they won't come and invest, and you won't be able to get access to the oil. If you make it too lax, then the people of Ghana lose. Well, there's a balance that can be found.
Yeah. Given that you come from a country that has experience with this sector, do you feel like largely we are doing the right things?
Yeah.
Are we doing the things to ensure that for Ghana as well, this turns out to be the real engine to modernize and bring this country to development?
I think Ghana is doing a very good job at developing its industry, but to some extent the jury is still out.
Yes.
There's no revenue yet come in.
No.
On the other hand, you have created an environment where foreign companies seem willing to come and invest. And you see Tullow, in Anadarko, in other companies that are pouring in to look for the opportunities. The Ghanaian government has taken time to look at examples from elsewhere, and I know they've been to the UK, they've been to Norway, they've been to Trinidad and Tobago, which has a similar kind of setup here. That's very wise, to look at examples from other countries. And they have the experience of Nigeria as well. I would advise going there to see what has worked and what's not worked.
What has not worked, yeah.
So gaining that experience from around the world. There are two big risks, and I think both are being addressed, but you need to keep constant attention. The first is the risk of haste. You're so desperate to get the oil as quickly as possible, you cut corners or you strike deals that aren't good in the long run. Now, the companies are as keen to develop first oil as swiftly as the Ghanaian government does, and that's fine. It means very hard work for everybody, and it means the government keeping up itself with what is going on. And if it takes too long to process some of the decisions, too long to put in place, the whole thing will slow down. So the Ghanaian government has set itself a cracking pace, and it has to keep up with that. The second thing is transparency. And transparency is vital in any sector, and particularly in the oil sector. And that is in many ways your best guarantee against things going off the rails. And there are stories from other African countries of the Minister of Petroleum sitting there looking at the tankers come in and out of the port saying, one for the company, one for the government, one for me. One for the company, one for the government, one for me.
Yeah.
You don't want that situation. And that can be remedied through applying the rules that exist now in the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, EITI. and there are experiences from other countries of how to put in place sufficiently transparent regulatory structures that people can see where the money goes, the companies can see what's going on in the government, the people can see what's going on. That's very important, to have that transparency, because it'll inspire confidence on the part of the people. Yeah. Throughout Ghana, particularly in the western region, they want to know, where is this oil money going? Yeah. And the government has to be able to have an answer for them. Yeah. And likewise from the investors, from the business, they'll say, here is a government we can trust. When they say they're going to do this, they do it, and we can see what's happening, and we see where the money we're paying is going.
Yeah. Do you think that the people of the western region, I mean, is there some benefit to being close to the oil?
Yes, there is. Aberdeen is the capital of the Scottish oil industry. Yeah. And it is now a prosperous town. It is well run locally. That's very important. So the local government there, the town council, yeah, learnt how to use the oil industry existing there to the benefit of local people. They get some revenue, of course. They get some revenue from the companies who are operating out of there, but they use it well to develop their infrastructure and to train their people. But you can't force people into these kind of jobs. The companies have to be free to choose people who are capable of doing the job.
That's the
thing.
You
can't say, you must employ 10 people from this village, whatever. Okay, if those people are capable of doing the job, absolutely. But they need to be, the local authorities can do their bit in developing the infrastructure and helping train the people so that they can benefit from the industry that exists there. But you can't stop people coming in from outside, because that will choke off the industry itself.
So they will benefit anyway because they are close to it, and services will be required for the operations.
And that's drivers, the hotels, visitors of all kind. Yeah. As long as there are enterprising people there, yes, who will deliver the service that's required, they can benefit. But the local authorities can also make the effort to encourage people. And I know there are training institutes that are being set up there to train people more specifically in oil business. That's an excellent idea, excellent idea. And there's no reason why the smartest people from Western region, instead of maybe going off to Accra or the United States or wherever, can develop their skills locally and use them locally and bring that wealth locally.
Oil it's just another commodity, isn't it?
The growth of the United States is based hugely on commodity. Development of commodities, agricultural produce, mining produce, iron ore and the rest.
Without value addition? You mean in its primary form?
Its primary form was the origins of it. It did export, but it also developed it for local consumption. Now, one of the important things about the Jubilee oil field is the gas that is there.
Right.
And that was very similar circumstances to the UK, where the oil was a core part of it, but in fact the gas, in many ways, became the more important part of it. And that was gas that was brought on shore, and for the whole of the British economy, there was a huge boost from cheap energy that was delivered by the gas.
Electricity.
I remember in my own home, we were connected to North Sea gas in 1970, 78, something like that. Yeah. And it was half the price, it was
reliable,
clean and efficient and reliable.
Yeah.
And that had a big transformational effect throughout the British economy, that we had this regular, reliable source of economic energy. And that provided a boost to the whole economy. And that, I know, is the intention here, to use the gas supplies, which are also an important part of the Jubilee reserves, to bring onshore and develop. Raw materials themselves, the export of raw materials, are no harm to an economy. It's how you manage it and how you are able to develop added value or ancillary benefits from that. So the gold mining industry here has been a benefit to the country. The export of cocoa has been a benefit to the country. It's all brought money, skills,
I don't know that everybody would agree with you on that. When you say, well, not everybody, but when you say that the gold mining has brought benefit, the gold mining sector is one of those areas where on a regular basis you get people wondering where on balance really whether it has been beneficial or not. So, I mean, you think it has, obviously.
Yes, from what I have seen. Okay, it has taken time to develop that skill, but it is, the people of the Western region have employment, the benefit. the companies have got better at developing their corporate social responsibility.
Yeah, that's key, isn't it?
And I think you have the opportunity now with the Jubilee field that all the companies coming in should commit themselves to develop that kind of corporate.
Because there are
social
lessons to be learned
responsibility.
from that we can.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Cocoa, the benefits were spread throughout the country. Wherever you could grow cocoa, people could benefit from. That's a rather different kind of raw material. But the development of raw materials does not in itself lead inherently to underdevelopment. It's how you use it. Now, this country cannot use all the oil it will produce. You need to sell it onto the global market. But it will produce a stream of revenue over a period of 20 years or more that the state can use. And the key thing is using that revenue from whatever raw material wisely.
But if you took cocoa, don't you think we would have gained a lot more benefit if it was a processed product? I mean, a value had been added rather than just selling cocoa beans. That's the point I'm making about adding value.
You can, but those industries should develop of their own accord if you have a competitive advantage, if you can attract investors who will build cocoa processing
That's it,
facilities here. And if they can do that competitively, that's fine. If they can't do it competitively, you're still better buying it in because you end up subsidizing these manufacturing industries. And subsidies basically are taking money from the taxpayer and giving it to the industry, which is not an efficient, rather than the industry producing tax that goes to the people of the country.
Interesting. I can't let you go without asking you about, Britain and Ghana. I mean, Britain has gotten more and more active here. I mean, it's always been. But before you go, I mean, what is it that excites Britain about Ghana? What do you want from this partnership?
It's interesting, over the last few years that I've been watching Ghana, Ghana is now on the map for the UK. To some extent, it has always been here.
Yes.
There's long historical links between the country, but more so than ever now, it's on the map for two reasons. The oil industry is one.
Yes.
The secondly is that it is such a great example of how an African country can develop politically and economically. And that provides a great incentive for British business to come here. And President Mills, when he was in London, explicitly gave a message that we are open to business, we are a government that you can trust, come and invest here. And a lot of British companies are taking up that challenge, particularly in the oil sector. We have expertise and companies dealing with research, risk management, hose manufacture, all kinds of service industries supplying the oil. They're all coming here regularly. We had one trade mission last year. We have two more coming in this year, bringing those British companies offering. That's not alone. We have long-standing British investors here, like Unilever, who've been here for over 100 years. Likewise, Cadbury's, alongside the new ones, of which Tullow is probably the largest single, but the other one is Vodafone, who are coming in here because Ghana is a land of opportunity. And I think that's also feeding through into many of the Ghanaians who live in the UK, who are finding times are quite hard there. They may be even better back here.
I appreciate you coming.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Thank you.